Hi, welcome to Nina in the Kitchen, where today I'm honoring a request from Linda, who asked if I could make a challah bread. If you don't know what challah bread is, it is so excellent in so many ways. It's used by Jewish people on the Sabbath. It's an enriched bread. It's enriched with oil and egg. You can use milk or butter, but then it's not kosher any longer. So you can do a lot of things with it. You can even fill it. And it's a great beginner bread. So if you're just getting into making bread, this is an easy bread to, actually it's easy to knead by hand. You can use a mixer like I'm going to do today. You can also use a food processor, and I'll talk about the differences as we go along. So let's just get started. Oh, here are the ingredients. This is 1/2 cup of, I'm using room temperature water. That's 110 grams of water. And I've mixed this with 1/4 cup of vegetable oil, 209 grams. Or you can use butter, like I said, 4 tablespoons of melted butter. That would be 56 grams. That would be delicious. Then we have two whole large eggs plus 1 yolk. The extra egg white is kept off to the side. I'm going to add 2 tablespoons of water to that, mix that up, and this egg white becomes your egg wash so that it comes out with a shiny crust. It's a beautiful, beautiful bread. I'm also going to take this and just mix these eggs up a little bit. 1/4 cup of brown sugar. This is a light brown sugar. You can use white sugar if you like. I like the brown sugar for a couple of reasons. One is it gives a really good depth of flavor to this bread. The other reason is that it's hygroscopic, meaning that it attracts moisture to itself. So it will keep your bread moist for longer than if you use just white sugar. And that's 54 grams, 1/4 cup. This is 2 1/4 teaspoons, 1 packet of instant yeast. That's 10 grams. Instant yeast, if you're buying it in a packet, can be called bread machine yeast or rapid rise. That can go right in. By the way, this is how you would start if you're making this by hand. You start with your wet ingredients in a bowl, you add flour to that, and when it gets too hard to move around the bowl, you put it on your counter and you start kneading it. Same thing goes with a mixer. In a mixer, you start with your wet ingredients and you add your dry ingredients to it. If you're using a food processor, it's just the opposite. You first put your dry ingredients in the bowl and you put your wet ingredients on top, and then you run the blade. So I just wanted to mention that because I killed a food processor by trying it the opposite way one time. That's a lesson learned, let me tell you. For flour, I'm going to put 3 cups of flour in. That's 375 grams. So I'm putting this on the mixer. If this flour turns out not to be enough, and flour is a powder, so it's very volatile. It changes with the humidity and so on. Just put by tablespoon increments flour in there. I'm going to get this started. Medium speed. I'll knead it for about 4 minutes and I'll show it to you then. My dough is coming together. I forgot to mention this. My dough is coming together now. It's been going for about 30 seconds. So now is when you add your salt. Yeast loves sugar, not salt. So you just kind of put it around the edge of the bowl. Now you just run your mixer on medium and it will gently pick up whatever salt you put in there. And so again, that was 1 1/4 teaspoons or 6 grams of salt. If this dough forms a ball and cleans the sides of your bowl, then there's too much flour in it. This is an enriched dough, and what that means is that it's going to be, you want it a little wetter than, say, a bagel dough or a rye bread or something. So I'm going to put a little bit of flour down. You should always take your dough out and put it on the counter and just see how it feels to you. When you put flour on your counter, just remember you're adding it to your bread. So at this point, I do flour. From now on, it's oil only or a bare counter because you don't want to add any more to your bread than you have to. It will weigh the bread down. This is a really beautiful dough. It's elastic and nothing is on my hands. So I'm going to go with this. It doesn't need any more flour, doesn't need any more ingredients at all. Now we're going to put this in an oiled bowl, but for right now, what I'm going to do is, you see there's a bottom, it's kind of messy, and there's a top. The top is nice and smooth. This is the bottom of my bread, and I'm going to keep it on the bottom and take this dough and pull it towards me. And if you can see this, it was dragged across the counter, it was kind of sticky. Turn it and do the same thing. Just pull it towards yourself and you can feel it dragging. I'm going to just do that. What that does is it creates a tension right over the surface, and instead of your bread rising and going out flat, it will rise up. You see, just like that. That is a beautiful dough. It's nice and smooth, it's elastic. So I've got this large bowl. I drizzled a little oil in it. I don't know if you can see that or not. But what I do is I will take this beautiful dough and use it sort of like a sponge. I have the dough, I put it in with the oil, and then just sweep it around. And then you can use this, put it back into shape. Now the top of the dough is oiled, and so is the bottom. Lid goes on, and this will take a little longer to rise than, say, a simple white bread loaf, if you're used to making that, because it is an enriched dough, so it'll take a little longer. I'm guessing between 1 to 2.5 hours, depending on the ambient temperature in your kitchen. So I'll see you when it's doubled in bulk, and we'll go from there. Well, the bread has doubled in size, as you can see. It's a beautiful loaf. And what I did, and this is an option, but I put this, after it was risen, into my refrigerator for about a half hour. And the reason for that is I want to chill this. And the reason for that is that if you braid a chilled dough, and classically challah bread is braided. So if you work with braids, it's much easier to do it if the dough is chilly than if it's room temp and it's kind of sloppy. And so we'll get to that right away. What we did was, as it's rising, that's called a proofing. And it proves to you, the baker, that your yeast is working, that it's able to rise dough. So I'm just going to knead it a little bit, and that redistributes the yeast inside the dough. And then I'm going to weigh it. And I want to, in fact, I think I'll do it without weighing it, just so if you're eyeballing it, you can kind of see where I'm going with this. What I'm going to do is make a very simple 3 braid dough. Challah bread typically has 6 strands of dough that's braided. To me, that is daunting. I'm just going to do a very simple 3 braid challah bread, but in order to get 6 braids, I'm going to do a double-decker. So the way to do that is I have this dough. I'm going to take about 1/3 of it off. 2/3 of it goes towards the big base part of the bread, and this will be the top, which is smaller. So I'm just going to divide this into 3 strands and 3 strands, and I'll be back. I divided this into 3, what will be 3 larger braids or strands, and they each weigh 164 grams. Then I did 3 smaller, and those are each 82 grams. And on my counter, I've placed these 2 pieces of tape, and that just shows me where 16 inches is going to be, because I want these to be 16 inches in length for all of them. And okay, we're there. That was easy. So I'm just going to roll these all out till they're 16 inches. Oh, that is 32 centimeters. Okay, well, here we have the 3, what will be the top braid, the 3 thinner, smaller braids, and then these heavier braids. There's 2 ways to create a bread that is 3 strands. You can start up here, close this off, and then start braiding. But what I like to do, because for me, it seems to come out better, it comes out more even, I put the 3 strands side by side. Any braid that you do is muscle memory. So you determine where the middle is, which is right about here. So you flip one end over. There you go. When you get down to the end, you pinch it all together, and you can even give it a little squeeze. And then, to get the other side of this braid, what you do is you lift the whole thing up, flip it, and continue. And there's your braid. Now we go back to this egg wash that we made earlier. Just go ahead and paint this with the egg wash. The egg wash does 2 things. It puts a glaze on it, so it makes it look really pretty out of the oven. And the second thing it does is it glues everything together. Now you can leave this straight. You can make it into an arch, which I think is really pretty. I'm going to leave it just like this. You always want to do, whether it's bread or pastry, a second glaze before it goes into the oven. And the reason for that second glaze is so that it creates a shine. This will not be so shiny if you put it in with a single glaze. So always, if you're going to glaze, do 2. You don't want this to be wet when you put the second braid on. It'll slip right off. So wait for it until you feel that it's very sticky. And then you just add the second braid onto it. And I have some poppy seeds. So I'll just do a little dusting of poppy seeds. Poppy or sesame is what is traditional. Now this has to rise a second time. The way that I do that, and the second rise shouldn't be as long as the first one was. If it took an hour for your bread to rise, I would look at it in 30 minutes, 40 minutes, something like that. Now you don't want to draft on this. And it's a very delicate situation here. So you can't really cover it well. This is the best thing that I have found to do with my breads when they're like this, is I do a garbage bag. I take a garbage bag. I make sure there's air all around the bread, all around the dough, I should say. Then take a bottle. We don't drink soda, but we have wine. So I'm putting the wine bottle right in the middle. I'll try to show this to you. Right where that loop is, or right next to the bread, it doesn't matter. Make sure that there's air in here, and then you just close it up. So now it's nice and tight. It's at room temp. Let this come back to another rise. In the meantime, you want to set your oven for 375 Fahrenheit, which is 190 Celsius. Make sure your rack is in the lower third of the oven. And when it comes up to temp, and this is ready to go, it goes in. Well, this is ready to go in, and what you want to do with any bread is let it go to about 80% of its rise before you put it in the oven. What happens in the oven is the last burst of oomph that your bread gets, and that's called oven spring. So you still want a little wiggle room so that when it goes into the oven, you get that bloom. And what I'm going to do, you can't poke this bread because of the glaze on it. So what I'm going to do is do another glaze, one last one, and this is for shine. And then just put this in the oven. This will bake at 375, 190 Celsius. It goes in for about 30 to 40 minutes, I would say. It's golden brown, beautiful, and when you tap it, any bread, when you tap it, it will sound hollow. And that's how I tell that it's done. I'm putting this in, and I'll see when it comes out. Well, here is the bread, and it is beautiful. I did actually take the temperature because I realized that the upper braid, being smaller, is going to bake before this does. It started getting brown, and so what I did, because I didn't want it to get too brown, is I just put foil over it for the last 10 minutes of baking, just to protect it. If you don't want to take the temp, you just tap it, and you hear that it's hollow. Because this is two breads, you want to do it on the top and on the bottom. The internal temp was 170 Fahrenheit. With bread, you have to, unfortunately, you have to let it cool down. If you cut into it right now, what happens is it's still wet inside. It's still basically baking. And all of that moisture that's in there will collapse and become gummy. And the whole interior of your bread, the structure of it gets ruined, which is too bad because it smells so good. But just be patient and give it at least an hour. But really, you should cool it down completely before you cut it, and that will finish the baking process. So what do you do with challah bread? Well, if you put this on your dinner table, good luck having any of this left over because it's so delicious, and people just love it, and it's beautiful. But things you can do with it, you can make toast and jam, of course. You can make sandwiches. Hamburgers are delicious on this. French toast, and the other thing I'm thinking is bread pudding. Any of those applications, you will not be sorry that you made this. So get in the kitchen and bake. I'm ready to cut into this bread. It smells so good. So here it is, the moment of truth. Oh, it's nice and soft, moist, still a little warm, and a nice tight crumb. I think of challah bread and brioche being sort of the same, but brioche has a lot of butter in it. So this is like brioche light, but it's still so delicious, and you can do so many things with it. I hope you try this recipe. It's subtly sweet, it's eggy, it's really, really good. So thank you all for watching. I do appreciate it, and stay safe out there, guys. Bye.